Rita stormed into Harry's office, her eyes burning with fury. She barely glanced at the secretary as she marched straight past her, the sharp click of her heels echoing through the hallway. She didn't knock, just opened the door wide and let herself in, slamming it behind her. "Harry," she snapped, her voice laced with frustration. "The company's management needs a serious revisiting." Harry was sitting behind his desk, a half-smile tugging at the corner of his lips as he watched his sister pace back and forth, her movements sharp and tense. He leaned back in his chair, doing his best to remain calm, though he couldn't help but feel a little amusement bubbling inside him. Rita was adorable when she was angry, her cheeks flushed, her lips pursed in that familiar, fiery expression. "Rita, calm down," Harry said, his tone soothing. He leaned forward slightly, trying to keep the situation under control. He had seen her like this before, and he knew it was just a matter of time before she'd get over her irritation. But Rita wasn't hearing any of it. She was too fired up, and the words came pouring out in a rush. "That woman, Lynette. She's manipulating the manager. Seducing him, using whatever she has to get him on her side. It's blatant, Harry. I can't believe this is happening under my nose." She fumed, her fists clenched by her sides, her body practically vibrating with the intensity of her anger. Harry couldn't suppress his grin any longer. Rita was all worked up, her voice cracking with frustration, and to be honest, it was a little endearing. He loved seeing her get passionate, even if it was over something like this. He didn't let his amusement show though, not wanting to make her more upset. Instead, he kept his expression neutral, leaning back in his chair and folding his arms. "I get it, Rita. I do," he said, keeping his voice even. "But maybe, just maybe, you're overreacting. You know how she is. She's trying to climb her way up, and it's not the first time she's done this." Rita's eyes flashed with anger as she turned to face him, her fists balled tightly at her sides. "You don't get it, Harry. This isn't just her playing a game. She's compromising the entire integrity of the company. The manager is falling for it, hook, line, and sinker. And now the rest of the team will see him as weak. We'll lose their respect, and that could ruin everything. We can't let someone like her take over, Harry. You know that." Harry could feel the weight of her words, and the seriousness in her eyes wasn't lost on him. He knew she was right about one thing: the company's management had a fine line to walk. It only took one bad move, one poor decision, and the whole thing could come crashing down. But Harry also knew this wasn't just about Lynette, it was something deeper for Rita. She hated feeling vulnerable, hated losing control. And that woman was the catalyst for all of her frustrations. "I know you're upset," Harry said gently, "but getting worked up like this won't help. You're the boss here. You need to handle things with clarity, not anger. Let's figure out a plan together." Rita stopped pacing and stared at her brother for a long moment, her chest rising and falling as she took deep breaths to calm herself. She was still furious, but Harry's steady presence was starting to ground her. She crossed her arms over her chest, her gaze softening as she met his eyes. Just fix it, Harry," she muttered, a little calmer now, though the fire still simmered in her voice. "I don't want to see her continue with this. She's bad for the company. And for you." Harry's smile finally broke through. He leaned forward, a genuine warmth in his eyes. He had a deep admiration for his sister's drive, her unwavering dedication. He couldn't help but feel a little proud of how much she cared about the business, even if it led her to moments like this. "Don't worry, Rita," he said softly, "we'll take care of it. But you need to trust me. You don't have to fight every battle alone, okay?" Rita blinked, her anger still there, but softened by his words. She sighed and sat down in one of the chairs opposite him, running a hand through her hair in frustration. "Good afternoon, everyone," Lynette called out with a sweet, almost saccharine tone, her voice carrying clearly across the open plan office. She knew exactly how to make an entrance. She leaned casually against a nearby desk, glancing at her colleagues as if waiting for them to notice her presence. Almost immediately, a few of the employees looked up from their work, their expressions shifting from indifference to curiosity. Lynette soaked in the attention, a smug smile curling on her lips as she began her tale. "Ah, it's been such a productive day," she began, her voice dripping with false humility. "You know, the manager and I had a wonderful conversation earlier." She paused dramatically, letting the words settle. "It seems he has taken quite a liking to me, and, well, he's promised to look into some new opportunities for me here. Isn't that just sweet?" The office fell into a stunned silence, and Lynette reveled in the effect her words had on everyone. A few of her more supportive colleagues exchanged glances, a couple of them nodding slightly in agreement, though others looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Lynette leaned in slightly, as if to share a secret, her voice dropping to a low whisper that could still be heard across the room. "It seems the manager is so impressed with my work ethic and dedication that he's planning on giving me a little more responsibility. After all, he said I deserve it, far more than some people around here." She glanced pointedly over at Rita, who was sitting at her desk, silently observing the drama unfold. Lynette's eyes flashed with triumph as she spoke again, her tone now almost too sweet. "I guess it's true what they say, when you truly dedicate yourself, people start noticing. Not everyone can handle the pressure, you know." A few murmurs rippled through the office, and Lynette could feel the tide shifting. She knew she had the upper hand now. Rita remained silent, her jaw clenched, but Lynette's words were like daggers. She could feel the weight of the growing gossip and the looks from her colleagues. Some were even nodding, agreeing with Lynette's insinuations. They whispered amongst themselves, casting furtive glances at Rita, who sat in her chair, seething with fury but still holding her composure. "Well, it's clear that some people have the manager's respect, while others—" Lynette let the sentence hang in the air, her eyes flashing with subtle disdain. She turned her gaze toward Rita again, her words cutting. "It's just unfortunate that some people don't know how to handle themselves in such an environment. Don't you think, Rita?" Rita's knuckles whitened around the edge of her desk, her body tense with barely contained rage. The mocking tone in Lynette's voice was unmistakable, and the air around them seemed to grow heavier by the second. One of the younger employees, Karen, who had always been a bit of a sycophant, spoke up nervously, her voice laced with uncertainty. I think Lynette's right, you know. She's been putting in a lot of extra effort lately. It makes sense the manager would want to acknowledge that." Rita's gaze shot over to Karen, her eyes narrowing. She didn't say a word, but the contempt in her stare was enough to make Karen look away awkwardly. Rita wasn't stupid, she knew the game Lynette was playing. Another employee, Chris, leaned in to join the conversation. He had always been friendly with Rita, but his loyalty seemed to waver. "I mean, maybe Rita's a little too hard on people. Not everyone can keep up with that level of intensity, you know." Rita felt the sting of Chris's words, but her expression remained impassive. This was no longer about what they said, it was about what they were doing. They were beginning to take sides. Lynette could hardly hide her smugness now. Her plan was working perfectly. She could see the divide growing, a subtle but clear shift in allegiances. A few others, like Jen and Mark, had begun nodding in agreement, their eyes darting nervously between Rita and Lynette. They, too, seemed to be leaning in Lynette's favor. Rita stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. The movement was sharp, and everyone in the office seemed to stop in their tracks, watching her closely. The tension in the air was palpable. "Well, Lynette," Rita said, her voice controlled but icy, "I'm glad you found your place here. But don't mistake kindness for weakness." She let that last statement hang in the air, her gaze locking with Lynette's for a beat too long. Without waiting for a response, Rita grabbed her things, her eyes never leaving Lynette as she walked briskly toward the exit. The office was eerily silent as the employees watched her leave, the undercurrent of shifting loyalties running thick between them. Lynette let out a satisfied breath as Rita disappeared out the door. Her eyes gleamed with victory, her presence now undeniably solidified in the office. As Rita walked down the hallway, the whispers began to swirl. Those who had once backed her now exchanged hushed words about her overbearing attitude and unwillingness to adapt. It was clear now, Lynette had begun her reign, and the office had already begun to turn its back on Rita. That evening, Rita stepped out of her car and took a deep breath of the cool night air. The soft lights of the lounge glowed warmly in front of her, and inside, music drifted gently through the windows. She had chosen this spot intentionally, quiet, familiar, and far away from the chaos of the company drama. She needed a break, and there was only one person she could truly relax around, her longtime friend, Janet. Janet was already waiting at a cozy corner booth, waving enthusiastically the moment she saw Rita. With her ever-vibrant energy and sassy charm, Janet was the kind of friend who made the weight of the world feel lighter, at least for a while. "Girl. You finally made it," Janet said, getting up to hug her. "I was beginning to think you chickened out on me." Rita chuckled softly, easing into the seat across from her. "I needed a breather. Work's been a mess." Janet arched a brow playfully. "That serious? Come on, spill it." The waitress arrived and took their orders. Janet ordered her usual cocktail, but when Rita asked for a fresh juice, Janet stared at her, blinking. Rita rolled her eyes and laughed. "It's a long story, Janet." "I've got all night," Janet said, sipping her drink with a satisfied look. "Also, pregnant. I mean, I should be all serious and responsible and ask if you're okay and how you're feeling, but I'm too excited to pretend I'm not dying of curiosity. So spill every single detail." Rita smiled, finally feeling a sense of warmth and relief flood her chest. "It's complicated. It wasn't planned, and honestly, everything at work is turning into a circus. Lynette's been a nightmare, the managers playing favorites, people are whispering behind my back. And you've got a whole tiny human in there while dealing with that mess." Janet gasped. "You deserve an award, or maybe a foot massage. Or both." "I just wanted a break tonight," Rita said, sipping her juice. "To be with someone who doesn't have a hidden agenda." Janet leaned over and squeezed her hand. "You've always been the strong one, Ree. I know things are messy now, but you're not alone. You've got me. And this baby. This baby is going to have the coolest mom ever." Rita's eyes misted over, but she blinked quickly and gave Janet a teary smile. "You're the best." Janet grinned. "Duh. Now finish your juice, Mama. We're toasting to new beginnings, with vitamin C, of course." They both laughed, and for the first time in days, Rita felt like herself again. The fight, the gossip, the betrayal, none of it mattered in this moment. All that mattered was that she wasn't alone. Not anymore. Janet lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, her phone resting on her chest. The echo of Rita's news still lingered in her ears like a drumbeat, "I'm pregnant." It wasn't just the shock of the announcement that had her tossing and turning, it was what it meant for someone else, her brother. Anthony. He had always been quiet, reserved, the kind of guy who stayed in the background but noticed everything. And for as long as Janet could remember, he had been hopelessly, helplessly in love with Rita. He never said it out loud, but she had seen it in his eyes. The way he'd light up when Rita visited. The way he always found an excuse to stay around when Rita was near. The way he asked about her, casually, like it was nothing, but always too often to be innocent. Janet sighed, rolling to her side, hugging a pillow. Now, Rita was pregnant. And not by Anthony. And the worst part? Anthony didn't even know yet. The next morning, Janet found herself staring into her coffee cup, debating whether to keep the secret or tell her brother. When Anthony walked into the kitchen, sleepy-eyed and shirtless, she nearly choked on her toast. He yawned, then glanced at her. "You went out last night?" Janet nodded slowly. "Yeah. I met up with Rita." At the mention of Rita, Anthony perked up just a little. "She's okay." Janet hesitated. "Yeah. Well. I mean, kind of." He raised a brow. "Kind of." She forced a casual shrug. "She's just going through a lot at work. You know how drama follows her like a shadow." Anthony smirked slightly. "It's not her fault. People just don't know how to appreciate her." There it is, Janet thought. That stupid sweet loyalty in his voice. Her heart sank. "She's pregnant," she blurted. Anthony froze mid-step, spoonful of cereal halfway to his mouth. "What?" Janet swallowed hard, looking up at him. "She's pregnant, Anthony." He stood there silently for a moment. The spoon lowered. His expression didn't change much, but the light in his eyes flickered. Just for a second. "Oh," he said. "Just that." It wasn't planned, and honestly, everything at work is turning into a circus. Lynette's been a nightmare, the manager's playing favorites, people are whispering behind my back. And you've got a whole tiny human in there while dealing with that mess. Janet gasped. "You deserve an award, or maybe a foot massage. Or both." "I just wanted a break tonight," Rita said, sipping her juice. "To be with someone who doesn't have a hidden agenda." Janet leaned over and squeezed her hand. "You've always been the strong one, Ree. I know things are messy now, but you're not alone. You've got me. And this baby. This baby is going to have the coolest mom ever." Rita's eyes misted over, but she blinked quickly and gave Janet a teary smile. "You're the best." Janet grinned. "Duh. Now finish your juice, Mama. We're toasting to new beginnings, with vitamin C, of course." They both laughed, and for the first time in days, Rita felt like herself again. The fight, the gossip, the betrayal, none of it mattered in this moment. All that mattered was that she wasn't alone. Not anymore. Janet lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, her phone resting on her chest. The echo of Rita's news still lingered in her ears like a drumbeat. "I'm pregnant." It wasn't just the shock of the announcement that had her tossing and turning, it was what it meant for someone else, her brother. Anthony. He had always been quiet, reserved, the kind of guy who stayed in the background but noticed everything. And for as long as Janet could remember, he had been hopelessly, helplessly in love with Rita. He never said it out loud, but she had seen it in his eyes. The way he'd light up when Rita visited. The way he always found an excuse to stay around when Rita was near. The way he asked about her, casually, like it was nothing, but always too often to be innocent. Janet sighed, rolling to her side, hugging a pillow. Now, Rita was pregnant. And not by Anthony. And the worst part? Anthony didn't even know yet. The next morning, Janet found herself staring into her coffee cup, debating whether to keep the secret or tell her brother. When Anthony walked into the kitchen, sleepy-eyed and shirtless, she nearly choked on her toast. He yawned, then glanced at her. "You went out last night?" Janet nodded slowly. "Yeah. I met up with Rita." At the mention of Rita, Anthony perked up just a little. "She's okay." Janet hesitated. "Yeah. Well. I mean, kind of." He raised a brow. "Kind of." She forced a casual shrug. "She's just going through a lot at work. You know how drama follows her like a shadow." Anthony smirked slightly. "It's not her fault. People just don't know how to appreciate her." There it is, Janet thought. That stupid sweet loyalty in his voice. Her heart sank. She's pregnant, she blurted. Anthony froze mid-step, spoonful of cereal halfway to his mouth. What? Janet swallowed hard, looking up at him. She's pregnant, Anthony. He stood there silently for a moment. The spoon lowered. His expression didn't change much, but the light in his eyes flickered. Just for a second. Oh, he said. Just that. Janet felt the guilt twist in her gut. I didn't know if I should tell you. I mean, I know how you feel about her. Even though you never said it. Anthony looked down at his cereal, then walked slowly to the kitchen island and Saturday, it doesn't matter. It does, Janet said gently. She doesn't even know. And It doesn't matter, he repeated, firmer this time. He stared at the bowl like it held all the answers he needed. She's happy. Janet bit her lip. She's overwhelmed. But she has support. Anthony nodded slowly, the corners of his mouth twitching in a hollow, forced smile. Good. She deserves that. Janet's chest ached. I'm sorry, Aunt. He waved a hand. Don't be. This was bound to happen. I should have said something years ago. I was just, always too late. The room fell into a heavy silence. Finally, Anthony stood, rinsed his bowl, and said quietly, just, don't let her go through this alone, okay? I won't. And don't tell her about me. It's better this way. Then he walked out, leaving Janet feeling like she had broken something delicate. Her heart ached for both of them, for Anthony's silent heartbreak and Rita's unaware involvement. And deep inside, Janet began to wonder, what if things didn't have to stay this way? Anthony sat on the worn wooden bench in the park, the late evening breeze brushing against his face like a ghost of memories he wished he could forget. All around him, the world was quiet, just the rustling of trees, the soft chirping of birds heading to rest, and the occasional sound of children laughing in the distance. But in his world, everything was loud. Painfully loud. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly like he was trying to hold himself together. His eyes stared into nothingness as Rita's smile danced in his mind, so vivid, so warm, so painfully out of reach now. She's pregnant. Janet's voice echoed in his head again, and his heart clenched for the 100th time. Pregnant. That one word had unraveled years of silent hope. The kind of hope he built slowly, carefully, around small stolen moments. Around Rita's laughter, her kindness, the way she said his name like it mattered. He let out a shaky breath, burying his face in his hands. Why didn't I just say it, he muttered, the words cracking with emotion. Why didn't I just tell her how I felt? Tears welled in his eyes, hot and heavy. He wasn't the kind of man to cry, but tonight, the dam broke. I should have told you when we were 16, when you asked me if I believed in soulmates, and I said no, just to act cool. He let out a hollow laugh. I should have said yes, because you were mine. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of wildflowers nearby, and it made him think of that summer years ago when they all went camping. Rita had worn that pale blue dress, and her hair had caught the sunlight. She had looked like something out of a dream, and he, the boy too afraid to ruin what they had. I thought waiting was safer, he whispered into the night. I thought maybe one day you'd just notice. But now I'm just some guy you used to know. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, angry at himself. Angry at time. Angry at the cowardice that had held his heart captive. He remembered every time he had a chance. Every time she leaned on his shoulder during hard days, every time he could have kissed her and didn't, every text he typed and deleted, every birthday card signed with a simple "with love" instead of "I love you." Now she was carrying another man's child. Starting a life without him. And he was left with silence. Anthony looked up at the sky, stars just beginning to blink into existence. I loved you, he said to the wind. I still do. And I probably always will. His voice broke. But maybe that's a love meant to be quiet. He stood, slowly, the weight of unspoken love pulling at his shoulders. And as he walked away from the bench, from the dreams that never took form, a single tear rolled down his cheek.